really appreciate you being part of our group and taking the time to learn how to use energy awareness and energy arts to improve quality of your life. And today I wanted to bring up one of the major issues that hamper people's quality of life. So we'll give folks a couple of minutes to join our Zoom room. Obviously, there are a lot of folks who are joined recently. Marsha, if you don't mind, I would like to delegate co-hosting to you so you can let folks into the main room.
Surely.
Excellent. All right. So what are we going to explore today? It's the topic that is near and dear, not only to my own heart, but probably to your heart as well. And that is the topic of working with aches and pains in the body that diminish the quality of life that basically nobody wants to have. And this is something that very few people don't experience, right? Essentially, almost everyone experiences some undue tension and pain in their body, either from time to time or all the time. Now, when we work with this issue, the issue of chronic pain, and just in general, the issue of improving our vitality, the most important thing is to understand that pain is not a problem in itself. This is kind of a strange statement, isn't it? A lot of folks would probably prefer not to have pain, and I totally understand that. But it doesn't mean that we should consider it an enemy, because pain is actually a very important biophysiological feedback mechanism. It literally gives us the opportunity to pay attention to certain parts of our bodies that are not doing so well, that are compromised, injured, or weak. And if we just try to suppress the pain or pretend it's not happening, we simply kill the messenger. We literally don't get the message. We refuse to accept the message as such. And of course, the underlying root cause of pain is not going to go away because we just neglected it. Most likely it's going to fester and probably even get worse. How often do we experience that we neglect some issue and it just gets better? Well, sometimes it happens. It's a crapshoot. But often it doesn't happen. And so then things actually get worse. So what's the alternative? How do we pay better attention to it so that it would actually have a more beneficial outcome? Well, the more beneficial outcome would be not absence of pain. The more beneficial outcome would be a greater performance as a functional human being. Now that is something that few people want to pursue when they experience discomfort or pain in their body. But that's actually what we're here for. We're here not only to mitigate some symptoms, we're actually here to improve the quality of our lives and operate at the higher level of functioning as human beings. Now, what does it mean to be a more functional human being? Any ideas? What do you think would constitute a more functional human being? Feel free to chime in either in the chat, or if somebody wants to raise a hand and speak up, feel free to do that. I would love to hear your opinion about what more functional human being would look like. More endurance, freedom of movement, very good. Flexibility, great. What else? Well, may I add greater strength? So endurance is the ability to perform certain function over time. Greater strength is to actually be able to perform a more substantial performance or function in the moment. Not to be an emotional roller coaster. That's right, Myra. Nobody wants to be on a roller coaster anymore. Waking up with your cortisol and adrenaline at a good level. That's a good point, Spy. Basically, or cortisol especially, but adrenaline too, actually causes some degree of havoc in our health. And cortisol in particular is associated with inflammation. So if we suffer from chronic inflammation, which is pretty much one of the root causes of majority of diseases, then we need to be less awash with cortisol. How would we be able to become less awash with cortisol? How would we have less of this stress hormone soup in our bloodstream? We need to learn how to relax under pressure. And that's exactly what our next class is going to be about. So I'm going to compartmentalize this a little bit, because giving too much information in one sitting has been one of my major setbacks. And many of my students kept telling me over the years, you're giving too much information. We can't just digest it all at once. So please break it down into smaller chunks. And so now I'm actually going to chunk it up a little bit.
Lama,
Yes,
Rod was trying to share something.
Rod, please feel free to share something.
Oh, I was just saying, generally, if we're unblocked, so to speak, we're just better able to respond, be aware of others and our surroundings, and better to respond, basically.
You're absolutely right. And being able to respond rather than react is actually the key to being less stressed, relaxing under pressure, as I put it. When we react, reaction by definition is action against oncoming forces, whether it's a physical force like somebody is pushing you and you react, basically create resistance. And that resistance creates the collision of force coming at you, and you are creating counterforce. Well, that's one way to deal with things. And we know how that well it works. It creates more conflict, it creates more stress, and by and large, it often leads to all kinds of injuries. Because when the force is coming at you, the easiest way to get injured is by tensing up and just standing there and taking it like a man. Now, when I was young and stupid, I was a stuntman. I literally performed in various shows and films as stunt work. The stunt work, by definition, is the ability to perform acts that are dangerous to the viewer without endangering yourself, without jeopardizing yourself. Now, that's the fine art. And I actually taught stunt work in college as well. How do we do this? Well, one of the secrets to not being injured doing stunts is by relaxing and moving in the direction of force being projected at you. So for example, a punch is coming at me. I'm not gonna tense up and just get my jaw broken. I'm going to move like this. It's gonna look as if I got punched, but I actually moved my head at my own volition. I move my head in such a way that it blends with the flow of energy coming at me. This punch has certain kinetic energy. If I resist it, I'm gonna get hit and it's gonna cause some injury or damage. What if I move my head in the same direction at the same speed? Kind of like merging with the flow of traffic on a highway.
Mm.
If your car moves in the same direction where the other cars on the highway are moving, and you travel more or less at the same speed, well, the likelihood of collision is going to be much less. So that's basically what we use as the example of responding rather than reacting to the flow of things. So if there is a flow of traffic, we want to merge with the flow of traffic and be in the flow. That's right. Being in the flow goes hand in hand with being responsive, as Rod put it, as opposed to reactive. So thank you, Rod, for bringing it up. It's a really important point. Like I said, our next class is going to be dedicated to that. However, today we want to learn how to deal with the consequences of not being responsive. How do we deal with tensing up under pressure instead of relaxing under pressure?
Lama,
Yes?
it looks like Robert is waiting to share something.
Oh, excellent. Bob, please speak up.
Ha ha ha. I wasn't, but I will. I was thinking that one of the things of being a functional human being is falling within all the medical parameters, like blood pressure's right, everything in your body is working correctly, and you don't like have a fever and you don't have COVID or all that other crud.
Yeah, and even if you do have a COVID virus in your system, your immunity handles that so that you're not suffering from consequences.
Okay.
Because COVID is no more nor less aggressive virus than most other viruses associated with flu. There have been much more aggressive flu viruses, for example, the one that caused the influenza 100 years ago that killed 50 million people. Now, that was a much more severe epidemic. Nowadays, we're dealing with much less severe virus or aggressive virus, but our immune system still needs to learn how to handle it because it's a new virus that came online, so to speak. So you're absolutely right. Being able to function well physiologically is really important. And that's why we're talking about pain, is because it actually tells us that something is not working, not just mechanically, but also physiologically. And as you probably know really well, that physical actions and physiology ideally would be reflections of each other. On occasion, they are not, but when you function in terms of physical actions or physical movement and your abilities in concert with physiological functions, something amazing happens. We call it entrainment. Entrainment in this case means different parts of your system working together in concert. They are not conflicting with each other. They are not competing for resources. They're actually supporting each other's function. And that's a really important aspect of wellness. When we learn how to basically operate at such level where we are well because we align different aspects of our being in such a way that they work together. This kind of alignment is something that we will dive a little bit deeper in a later class dedicated specifically to working with our values and understanding our health deeper. What we're working with today is something that will give us a feedback mechanism. We already have it. We just need to pay attention to it. It's just like if you're driving a car, but you're not paying attention to all the gauges on the dashboard, speedometer and all the other gauges. If you are not paying attention to what's going on with the vehicle, who knows? Maybe you're going way too fast. Maybe you're going way too slow. Maybe your engine is overheating. If you're not getting any feedback, it's hard to tell. My car has gauges up to wazoo. It even tells me if there is a pressure change in my car's tires. So basically all kinds of bells and whistles come up. Now, what happens, we need to learn how to pay attention to bells and whistles in our own body. And pain is one of them. It doesn't always have to be painful to receive feedback. What are the conditions under which the feedback signals are perceived as pain? What do you think? Marsha, do you have any idea what the conditions are in the body under which feedback would be perceived as pain?
When there's enough dissonance, incongruence, that it's fighting inside of itself. Your body is resisting inside of itself. And so you're getting cross signals. And there's lots of things that outwardly could cause that. It could be some physical thing, putting pressure on your body to the point your body says that's too much to tolerate. Or it could be internal mental processes that are putting a level of stress on your body that says that's too much to tolerate.
Yes, very nice. That's exactly what I would say. And let me also add to that. So thank you, Marcia. And that's also important to remember that there is a certain threshold of pain. So the signals that operate or that are sent to the central nervous system, but they don't cross the threshold of pain, are not perceived as painful. They may first appear as a discomfort, as some degree of tension or some degree of malaise that you can't really put a finger on. They may also come off as just simply feeling tired or not having full range of motion and flexibility that you want to have. In other words, they don't have to be painful in order for us to begin perceiving them. Now, once we neglect them long enough, something interesting is going to happen. These signals are not going to go away. They actually will keep popping up or being even amplified, because the part of the body that sent the signal asking for attention, saying, hey, pay attention here, something's not working properly, something is dysfunctional, something is under duress or injured. This part of the body is not going to just shut up. It's not going to be like, oh, central nervous system is not paying attention to me. Well, fine, I'll just give up. No, in most cases, it's going to start amplifying its signals, like yelling at you, hey, are you not paying attention here? Come on, something is not working. Well, that yelling will eventually cross the threshold of pain. And that's when we start perceiving pain. And that pain first just appears to be usually a dull pain, not particularly acute, not particularly strong. Like if you measure it on a scale from 1 to 10, maybe at 1, maybe 2. In other words, you just have the signal barely crossing the threshold. Well, most people can tolerate that. Most people say, my foot hurts. Well, probably just uncomfortable shoe, or maybe I just stabbed my toe, so it'll get over itself. And then this pain that did not get resolved, that did not receive the attention that needed, doesn't go away. As a matter of fact, it keeps amplifying. That is the definition of chronic pain now. It's not acute, it's not sudden and strong. It most likely it's continuously amplifying, growing in volume, but it's not going to be at the same level or not consistently growing in value in volume. It sometimes drops down, sometimes increases, sometimes decreases. There are days when it feels like nothing bothers me, and sometimes you may wake up in the morning and feel like, oh my God, I'm kind of stiff and I'm sore. What's going on? Or maybe some other types of pain issues that you may detect that are chronic, that are basically just coming and going or staying more or less the same level, but often getting worse and worse over time. Well, that's a pretty clear indication that something needs attention, because it's not getting better by itself. And that's exactly why we want to learn how to work with chronic pain, to actually address the root cause of it and give attention to that part of ourselves that has been disempowered or weakened or compromised. And when you give attention to a part of yourself, guess what happens? Where attention goes, energy flows. Healing happens as a result of greater energy being provided to the part of the body that receives it when you pay attention to it. So it's kind of interesting. When we neglect the part of the body or disavow it and say, well, I just don't want to deal with it, it often doesn't get better for exactly that reason. It doesn't receive attention and it does not receive much energy as a result. But when we actually start paying attention to it, we may feel even more of the discomfort or pain. And most people don't want that, right? When we start paying attention to that, which was giving us grief, we may actually become more aware of it. And who wants that, right? Well, we want that because we want to become not only aware of pain, but we also want to be aware of what's causing pain. In other words, we recognize pain for what it is. It's a signal of something not working. Well, let's not actually just look at a signal and try to block it. Let's work on understanding and addressing what is causing its signal. And when we address what's causing the signal, well, by and large, it stands to reason that the signal will disappear or become much less. Because we're addressing the root cause of pain, obviously the pain is not going to be the same. Sometimes there is phantom pain. So that's not the same thing that we're working on today. We can address it at some other time. But the idea is that when we start paying attention to whatever is causing pain, we actually connect the dots between cause and effect. There is a certain causality to pain. It doesn't just happen for no reason at all. Some people say, I have no idea why it hurts, it just hurts. Well, yeah, that's because we don't know. We think that it just hurts. But when we start connecting the dots and understand the root causes, something amazing starts happening. We actually get a handle on the root cause. In other words, we realize in most cases, pain is not something that's been done to us unless we're being tortured or go through some car accident or some other unlucky event like that. In most cases, this chronic pain is a result of one of three things. We're either stressed out, which causes us particular holding patterns of tension, and tension leads to pain. Or we keep re-injuring ourselves because we have a certain old injury and we develop, we never rehabilitated from it properly. So we basically develop a compensatory pattern. We're compensating for some injured part of the body being disempowered or weak. And we essentially are likely to add more insult to injury because we are not functioning effectively. And the third is imbalance. And this imbalance is often also caused by our own actions. For example, I've worked with many people who go to the gym. And often people, when they go to the gym, actually cause themselves imbalance because they often work on those muscles they see in a mirror. And which muscles do you see in the mirror? The ones in the front of your body. The pecs, the chest muscles, the muscles in front of your shoulders called anterior deltoids, abs. Everybody wants to have six-pack abs. Nobody wants to have six-pack backs. So the back muscles are often neglected or not given anywhere as much attention as the abs. The muscles of the upper back that are antagonists of the pecs hardly ever receive as much attention. Posterior deltoid, which is the antagonist of anterior deltoid, hardly ever receives as much attention. Many people prefer to work on their biceps rather than triceps because biceps look sexy. Usually people give a lot more attention to the quads, the muscles of the front of the thigh. But the hamstrings, the muscles in the back of the thigh, often are neglected or not receiving anywhere as much attention, and so on. In other words, basically people often create more imbalance as a result of doing something that they think is a good thing. And understanding that, well, if we are causing ourselves this kind of grief, it's up to us to keep doing that or perhaps to stop doing it. If we see that we are the cause of most of our own imbalances and other issues, even injuries, often are self-inflicted injury. I'm not talking about some issue that seems to be completely random, even though there still needs to be some causality. Nothing just happens just because. But, you know, a meteorite falls on your house and hurts somehow. Well, you couldn't predict it, you couldn't evade it. And if that caused an injury, okay, well, we need to rehabilitate from this injury. And rehabilitation is also up to us. Of course, we can relegate responsibility to physical therapists or occupational therapists or some other people that we would rather think they should deal with our rehabilitation. But guess what? It doesn't work. We have to rehabilitate ourselves, and those professionals may only point us in the right direction, assuming that they're pointing us in the right direction, because many of them are actually not trained well enough to point us in the direction. And I'm not against physical therapy or occupational therapy as a profession in general. I just know that there are many professionals within that profession that are not well enough educated to actually help people rehabilitate. Otherwise, rehabilitation would be 100% success rate. And that's definitely not the case in many people's experiences. So we have to rehabilitate ourselves. And even if we sustain some repetitive injury that we didn't have to seek professional attention for, well, we need to rehabilitate from that too, right? We need to literally learn how to improve our quality of life, because nobody is as responsible for that as we are. It's just we often don't want to take responsibility there. Yes, Marcia.
Robert has another question. Bob, Robert, I'm calling you Robert because it says Robert, but he calls
Robert
you
works.
Bob. Bobby Robert has a question, has a thought.
What happened when I'm okay, when I go to bed, and when I wake up, I have hurt myself?
Yeah, like I didn't.
Bad dreams happen.
No, I don't think so. But I mean,
Well,
just like you go to bed, you know, and everything feels good, and then you wake up and there's a crick in your back or something, and the bed's good. The bed hasn't changed.
right.
I didn't put a brick underneath my back.
Well, so this morning, my girlfriend woke up and reported that her right hip wasn't working. It was like hurting and seized up with tension.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, obviously she knows how to heal herself, but she was kind of asking if I could help her as well. She's a professional healer. I'm a professional healer, so often help each other. But even if I wasn't there, I'm sure she would have been able to help herself recuperate from that sleep injury. So how do sleep injuries happen? Well, just like the body experiences certain holding patterns during the day, and often those holding patterns of tension lead to undue tension that causes pain. We also experience holding patterns when we're sleeping, especially if we sleep in an uncomfortable, twisted, or crooked position, and we're not aware of it. We are asleep, quite literally. We don't understand why our body hurts in the morning. But if we had an opportunity to observe ourselves over the course of the night, that would become much more apparent. Nothing was done to us by some third party. We basically did something completely unconsciously. And so that's one of the reasons why I also teach and practice dream yoga and yoga nidra, learning how to pay attention to ourselves even during sleep. I don't experience this type of issues when I wake up in the morning and something works worse than the night before. Why? Because I pay really close attention to what's happening with me while I sleep. Maybe I don't sleep as deeply as some other people, but I actually maintain some degree of awareness that also enables me to pay attention to my dreams and become lucid in my dreams. Oh, now we actually have the double whammy. The benefits extend not only to the physical body, but also to our experience in dreams. And that's something that I would love to introduce in our group during the third month, in the month of December, that we'll be exploring that particular subject matter more in depth, I promise you. However, what to do if you wake up in the morning and you realize that you're stiff or are hurting something? Well, this is an invitation to basically bring attention to that part of the body that hurts and potentially examine what is it that I could do to hurt myself that way. It sounds like a stupid idea to examine how you can hurt yourself, right? But if you don't know how you hurt yourself, you won't be able to figure out how to stop doing it. And if you examine how you hurt yourself, let's make sure that you maintain a level of mindfulness and go slowly so you don't push yourself further over the edge of the comfort zone, greater into the discomfort and pain zone. How do you do that? Well, you basically start skirting along the edge of the comfort zone instead of going across the edge of the comfort zone. Moving along the edge of the comfort zone is a very alternative way of moving our bodies. Most people want to reach certain things that are beyond the edges of the comfort zone. As they always put it, our dreams and aspirations always reside outside of our comfort zone. Whether you want to become more flexible or stronger or more capable in some other ways. And how do we get there? Well, we try to basically take a running leap and jump over the edge of the comfort zone, hoping that we're going to land in that place that we're dreaming of. Often, most likely, we end up in a place that is so uncomfortable that we have to retreat back. We may even end up at the place where we were dreaming we wanted to be. But because it's outside of the comfort zone, we can't sustain being there. We just basically have to retreat into the comfort zone because it's just too uncomfortable or painful. For example, you try to become more flexible. Most people, when they try to become flexible, they stretch. We'll have a special class dedicated to flexibility without stretching. I'm just giving you a simple example. When you stretch, you basically try to go beyond the edge of the comfort zone because that's how flexible you want to be. And once you cross the threshold of the edge of the comfort zone, you're going to start feeling discomfort and or pain. So instead of doing that, we learn how to navigate along the edge of the comfort zone, exploring what it's like to be on the edge instead of what it's like to be outside of our comfort zone. Now, there is a really interesting book called Flow by Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me how to spell his name because that's bizarre. But he is a world-renowned expert on flow states. And he kind of popularized the whole idea of flow state in the West. And one of the things that I fully agree with that he introduced in that book is that it's easiest to experience the flow when you find that sweet spot, the balance point between being overwhelmed and being underwhelmed. Or in other words, you find the balance where your skills or your abilities match with the demands or the level of challenge that you're dealing with. If your abilities are below the level of challenge, you become overwhelmed. You become burdened by the challenge or can't handle it very well. In other words, you're going to be outside of your comfort zone. If your abilities are way above the level of challenge or demands that life presents to you, you're underwhelmed. It's like nothing is really challenging you and nothing is really making your life interesting. So finding that sweet spot, the balance point between too much challenge and too much ability is going to be something that we can actually develop mindfully. So this is the mindfulness practice, the practice that is the key to being in the flow. And being in the flow, mind you, is the goal. It's the holy grail of Qigong. So if you're wondering, what does it have to do with Qigong? Well, it has everything to do with Qigong, because you cannot really do Qigong if you're not paying attention to the flow. The flow of Qi is what we need to pay attention to. If we don't pay attention to it, we cannot be in the flow. If we don't pay attention to the flow of Qi because we're too tense or too uncomfortable or too asleep, we basically result or end up doing some repetitive routines, forms, something that doesn't really give you the experience of flow. It just simply looks like a nice pastime. And that's basically what most people end up doing when they try to practice Qigong. They end up doing some exercises. Yeah, Marcia, you have a hand. Oh, please.
Yes, I wanted to, if I may, give an example of how I know I have done things with my body that have led to pain, that when I recognized the pain, I didn't know what I had done that had caused it. And taking the time to really examine, like, what am I doing that's leading to this? It took a little bit of examination, but here's a particular example. I used to have a Jeep Liberty. I really liked my Jeep Liberty. And when I drove it around town, I didn't really notice any cause from the car causing me to have pain. But eventually my body was saying there's something wrong. And the place it would show up was my hip and my shoulder and my knee. And I'm looking through my day like, what am I doing that could be causing this pain? Because I don't remember falling or banging into something. It was nothing that subtle. As I slowly began to examine my daily habits of movement, my habitual holding patterns, which include what it looks like when you're sitting or laying down on a bed, let alone standing, I realized that I walked around with a heavy purse on my shoulder a lot. And I mean, it was a satchel. It was big. It was my work purse, bag, book, everything in the world was in that thing. You know, it probably weighed 20 pounds at least.
Wow.
And I was sitting on my living room couch in a way that my comfort zone was to lean into the arm of the couch. So I would often kind of be curled up and crunched over on one side. And also because my Jeep was the way the steering was, I would tend to sit leaned over to the right there as well for reaching the gear shift and the other things. And it took a while to notice that I had all these habits of sort of twisting my body down onto the right side. And here was one that it took me a longer to see. Again, I loved my Jeep, but it wasn't until I took a cross-country trip that I realized how badly the pedals were oriented. So you're driving through town, you're moving a lot, so you don't get that habitual muscle reaction. But I drove from Michigan to Wyoming and further, and my knees would just ache like crazy because there was no place that I could put my feet and then just relax and let my left foot just rest and my right foot hold the gas pedal without my knee being slightly torqued. You know, and after a couple of hours of that, my knee was saying, like, this is not a natural position. So I share all those things to say, all of us go through the day doing habitual motions that one at a time or in the moment, we may not notice, but after hours or weeks or years of doing that thing, and that would include, Robert, how you get into bed, how you get out of bed, where you scrunched that pillow up, how you wad it, like on a given day, it's enough for the muscles to say enough. They're going to tighten up and be in that responsive pain. So that's why classes like this are good, because they slow you down long enough to have you look, what am I doing with my body?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Marcia. That is a really great example of awareness, where we literally have to start paying so much more attention to us than we used to in order to resolve discomfort or pain. So let's actually consider that we need to be grateful for discomfort or pain that we experience in our bodies, because they motivate us to pay attention to ourselves. If we get over this hurdle of feeling inadequate, if we're paying too much attention to ourselves, we've been indoctrinated by our upbringing or religion or society that we are supposed to be paying attention to others. Well, maybe we have some issues with our own bodies, just like rejecting our own physical bodies. And sometimes people have this kind of issue, or all kinds of issues that basically just distract our attention from ourselves. And so this is actually the key to self-empowerment. As I mentioned, where attention goes, energy flows. So we learn how to pay attention to ourselves. And by doing that, we create massive circulation of energy in our own system that allows to bring energy and empowerment to those parts of the body that used to be disempowered, weak, or compromised. Now, there are certain specific techniques that I also would like to introduce. So we're not just going to talk today theory, let's do some practice. The simplest technique is touch. When something hurts, that's a pretty normal response to touch some part of the body that hurts, right? It's like a child running around, maybe falling over, scraping the knee or hurting somehow else. Is she gonna just say, oh, that's nothing, I'm just gonna pretend it's not happening? Well, not likely. Most likely the child is actually gonna start crying and probably either rubbing that part of the body or going to the parents. Mommy, I got an owie. So the mother is also going to do something about it. If she has any ability to pay attention to the child, probably she will touch that part of the body that got compromised, injured, or hurt, maybe bring the attention of the child to it. It's a natural and innate ability to heal ourselves that we just simply forget. And so what we're learning is how to reclaim that natural right to heal ourselves, to be in charge of our own health. So how do we touch the part of the body that is asking for attention? Well, depending on how it hurts, we may either touch it or palpate it with the fingertips, or sometimes the pain may be so severe that even touching it lightly hurts, or it may be an abrasion or an open wound and you just don't want to touch it because you don't want to infect it, or it's just too painful to even touch it lightly. Some people also suffer from what they call like a reaction of nerve endings in the skin that basically makes it feel like you don't want to touch it even lightly, like even clothing, touching it feels painful, or just like brushing it with a feather would feel painful. A neuralgia, that's the term for it. Well, so basically there are ways to deal with even that. Let's see first how we deal with something that doesn't hurt as much. If the pain is not so severe that you cannot even touch the part of the body, or you don't have neuralgia, or you don't have open wound, well, that's okay to touch. So for example, if it's a shoulder, well, it's okay to touch the shoulder, maybe squeeze it a little bit. As you can see, I'm squeezing it. If you have any part of the body that is asking you for your attention, feel free to scan your body. And once you find that part of the body that might benefit from your attention right now, see if you can bring attention to it through touch. We are going to refine this touch in a moment, but first let's just figure out where that part of the body is and just touch it reasonably gently, not heavy-handed touch, a light-handed touch, but enough so that you feel like, okay, I feel that if I press more, it actually hurts more. You know what I mean? So if you are trying to push or press on a part of the body that doesn't need attention, it's not asking for it, it's not deficient or compromised, applying pressure is not going to hurt. You're pushing and it's like, okay, well, it's just heavy pressure, no big deal. But if you're applying pressure and it hurts, that is an invitation to pay attention. So how are we going to apply pressure when we find that particular spot or this particular area where it hurts? Like, for example, if my deltoid is a little compromised, I would actually apply pressure to the end of the muscle. Now, it really pays back well to know your muscles, to know your anatomy. But even if you don't know, the muscles that are tense or stiff often feel like ropes. Like, for example, if there is any sensation of some part of this muscle group that is like a rope, like it's increasingly tense or excessively tense. Well, then let's walk along this rope all the way to the end of it, where it attaches to the bone. By and large, most muscles attach to bones, with a few exceptions, of course. And then when you find the point where it attaches to the bone, you most likely will feel the area or the point of particular tenderness. That's right. The end of the muscle that is tense is usually going to be more tender than the body of the muscle itself. Again, there may be some exceptions from this rule, but it's a pretty steadfast rule. And so we go to the end of it and find a point. Now, we don't have to study anatomy and physiology to know the Latin name of the muscle. We don't even have to study acupuncture or acupressure to name this acupressure point or by a Chinese name. That's fine. We just simply need to pay attention to it. How do you pay attention to it? The same principle of mindfulness comes in. But in this case, the mindfulness as to the edge of the comfort zone in regard to level of pressure. So you actually experiment. What if I apply a little bit more pressure? What if I apply a little bit less pressure? Where is the edge of the comfort zone in terms of the level of pressure that doesn't push me too much over the edge? You can apply pressure with a finger, you can apply pressure with a thumb, but the idea is to basically match the level of tension in the muscle with the level of pressure that you apply. Just to give you kind of a silly example, if you imagine that you could cut off this end of the muscle from the humerus bone, we're talking about deltoid right now. So if you could cut it off, if that muscle still had the same tension, what would be the weight that it would be able to lift with this tension? Whatever the weight is, that is the indicator of how much tension there is in the muscle. If there is more tension, it would lift greater weight. If less tension, well, it wouldn't be able to lift as much weight. Okay, so that's pretty easy, even though a silly way to kind of understand, well, what is this level of tension we're talking about? It can be measured in pounds. That would be corresponding to the weight that this muscle would be able to lift if it was liberated from the bone. Okay, so now we want to apply the same level of pressure with the fingers. How do you know that you're applying 1 pound of pressure or 2 pounds of pressure? Well, again, let's imagine for a moment. If you go to a grocery store, you probably see some weight scales to weigh your potatoes or apples or whatever you buy. Unless you're shopping at Trader Joe's where they sell everything by one item, like you pay for an apple, not for a weight. However, forget about Trader Joe's. All other normal stores, most of them have scales, right? If you put the finger on the scale and apply pressure with that finger, the scale will give you a certain reading. If you apply 2 pounds of pressure, that's what the scale is going to show. If you apply 5 pounds of pressure, well, that's going to be the reading on the scale. 10 pounds of pressure, again, the scale will show that. Basically, it's not hard to grade or to fine-tune your pressure. And you just simply apply the same or similar pressure on that point, a point of attachment of the muscle to the bone. And see how you can also modulate the direction of this pressure. By direction of pressure, I mean not just pushing directly perpendicular to the surface of the skin. Just like we were talking about not going perpendicular to the edge of the comfort zone a few moments ago. I was talking about exploring the edges of the comfort zone by turning and moving along the edge. Well, here, in this case, I'm not just going to press directly perpendicular to the surface of my skin and to cause myself more pain. I'm going to apply pressure matching the level of tension. Apply towards the opposite end of the muscle. So if I walked along this ropey muscle and found one end of it, well, where's the other end? Well, the other end is somewhere up there. I mean, obviously it's above the shoulder joint. Okay. Well, in anatomy and physiology, they call it the origin and insertion of the muscle. Regardless of the names, we can apply the pressure that would match the level of tension in the muscle in the direction of the opposite end of that muscle. And when you do that, something amazing happens. This muscle will feel like, oh my God, somebody actually came along and helped me do my work. Because the tense muscle has been trying to do some work. Tension, basically, it's like if we're talking about lifting the weight, if that end of the muscle got liberated from the bone and you would be lifting the weight, well, if it's not lifting the weight, it is pulling on the bone, trying to lift the arm, for example. Okay, so what we're doing is we're basically helping this muscle achieve its dream. It's like this part of the body has a dream. And in this case, the dream is very simple. Bringing one end of the muscle closer to the other. But
I'm lost in the opposite directions. I'm sorry. Like, can you be a little bit more specific about the directions? I'm lost when you said pull it. Sorry?
Applying the pressure towards the opposite end of the muscle. If the opposite end of the muscle is above the shoulder, we're talking about the deltoid still. If we're applying pressure on the distal or point of the arm farther away from the shoulder, down the arm, so we apply pressure towards the opposite end, towards the shoulder. When you apply pressure towards the shoulder, you're literally helping this muscle manifest its dream. You are helping this part of your body to achieve what it's been trying to achieve. It's not stupid to just hurt for no reason. It's trying to achieve something. It receives signals of contraction from the central nervous system that basically are dedicated to making that happen. And when this muscle communicates to the central nervous system, mission success. I've been trying to manifest this, and somebody came along, even if it was just the other hand. Somebody came along and helped me achieve what I've been trying to. The central nervous system will take a little bit of time, and eventually we'll realize, okay, I don't need to send so many signals of contraction to this muscle. When the muscle doesn't receive so many signals of contraction from central nervous system, what will it do?
Lama, can you
Start
Sorry.
relaxing.
Yeah.
can you show us which muscle that you're working with so that he
The
can give you
deltoid.
a specific?
Yeah, because I don't know about muscle anatomy, so I don't understand what you're talking about the other end and stuff like that. So it will be useful if you have the diagram, you know. So over here.
So you're pointing at the origin of the posterior deltoid. So yeah, that's one of the areas in the body where there may be some tension. So if you feel tension in that area,
Yeah.
yeah, very good. So again, this is the muscle that does this,
Yeah.
pulls the arm backwards. Okay, so if you position your arm in that same position, what muscle is trying to achieve, and apply pressure on it. Does it feel like it's tender?
I mean, where exactly do I apply the pressure?
Where it's most tender. So you move your fingers kind of as if you're playing a musical instrument, and you find where it's most tender or sensitive. The pressure points that are sensitive are the ones that need to be pressed on. If the pressure point is not sensitive, there is no need to harass it because it's not asking for attention.
Okay.
So once you find the sensitive point, and you also move your body in such a way that it feels like that muscle is contracting or shortening,
Okay.
then you're literally engaging this muscle and doing something consciously that it used to do unconsciously. Does it make sense? When you do something consciously, then you have freedom of choice to keep doing that or to stop doing it. If you do something unconsciously, you can't stop it because you don't even know that you're doing it. So if you
Sorry,
have,
what is the conscious thing? The movement or the contraction of the muscle? I don't understand. What are you saying consciously and unconsciously?
contraction of the muscle and movement go hand in hand. So
But
both of
I
them
do
are-
move my body consciously. I'm not unconscious when I move my body. I don't
Well, of
understand.
course you do.
what you're
Of
saying.
course you move your body unconsciously most of the time. And on occasion, you become conscious of what you're doing and you move your body consciously. But most people move their body unconsciously most of the time. I'm sure that you do experience that too. What we're learning is how to become more conscious than you used to be. You know, if you were fully conscious until today, you wouldn't have any undue tensions and pains anywhere. You would just be so conscious of it, you just totally resolve all the tensions as they come up. You just mitigate them on the fly. But that's not the case.
Yeah, not really. If you play tennis, I mean, you can't just stop tennis and start massaging yourself.
If you play tennis, you train your body. If you play any sports or do any activities to that matter, you train your body to perform certain actions, and those muscles that are responsible for those actions, for example, hitting the ball with a racket, get trained. Now, some of them are not as strong as others. For example, many people experience tennis elbow. Well, tennis elbow is the result of performing a backhand stroke, and that engages the muscles called extensors of the wrist. I'm not going to inundate you with too much Latin terminology today, but it just gives you an idea that what the muscle does. It extends the wrist. This is the movement called extension. If you touch that muscle by the elbow where that extensor originates, that's where most people feel that pain, and that's why we call it tennis elbow. It's not really the elbow issue, it's the issue of the muscle that goes down the lower arm and allows us to extend the wrist. Now, if, for example, that's the case, I'm not saying that this is your case, but just using the example of tennis, if the tennis elbow is the type of pain that you suffer, well, this is a great opportunity to become aware. Okay, this muscle is not as strong as it could be, as it needs to be, in order to perform this function when I play. In other words, if muscle was fully capable, it would not hurt. Tension and pain is not a sign of strength.
But
It's a
it's
sign of weakness.
in pain because it's not strong enough.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, yeah.
So if it's not strong enough, what does the muscle need?
Practice.
It needs to get stronger.
Yeah.
Yes. How do you get stronger? Well, first, we need to make it so that it can function. Functioning of the muscle consists of ability to contract and relax. If it's tense, such as in the case of the tennis elbow, the extensor muscle gets tense, it is not functional because it's already holding tension, so there is only so little room left for any further contraction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then we understand that we need to release this tension. And if we release this tension, then this muscle will become more capable. Then we need to strengthen it. So first we need to release tension, and also that will mitigate pain. How do we release tension? We apply pressure on it, shortening it at the same time. So for example, I shorten this muscle extensor. Let's say I apply pressure on my opposite hand, opposite shoulder with a hand, and I apply pressure on that spot that is tender or tense. And I apply pressure towards the opposite end of the muscle, as we just talked about how it connects to the wrist and flexes extends the wrist. So I apply pressure down from the elbow towards the wrist.
So let me get this right. If it hurts here, you apply where the muscle ends, like on the other side. That's the idea, right?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
Yes. And so I'm applying pressure on my elbow where the muscle originates, and I shorten it at the same time. So I literally help the muscle achieve its dream. This dream of the muscle basically is to perform its function. If the function of this muscle is to extend the wrist, I'm helping it achieve its dream by extending it for it. And I apply pressure on the opposite end of the muscle, so I'm shortening it from both ends. This end is being shortened by extending the wrist, and the opposite end is apply pressure towards the wrist down the arm, so that the muscle becomes really nice and short. It's the opposite of stretching. When people think that the muscles are tense, they think they need to stretch. That's completely insane. It's working against the body rather than working with the body. So what we're learning is how to work with the body instead of against it. Applying pressure on the end of the muscle so it becomes shorter takes certain time. We need to exercise patience.
We also need to know the anatomy very well, right? Because right now I don't know where the end of my muscle is.
Well, that's why you're taking this class, so you learn.
But are you gonna have like a graph or something to teach us about this? Because there's so many muscles.
It's not an anatomy class, but I am introducing you to some principles of anatomy. And yeah, I can find some graphs just so that you have some visual aid.
Yeah.
There are abound on internet. It's very easy to find muscle graphs on Google. But if you feel like this is what you need, yeah, absolutely. I can find some graphs for you as well. And I will post them in our Facebook group. So the principle is very simple. We shorten the muscle and help it manifest its dream. It literally is a matter of just simply shortening it and waiting. We're waiting and waiting. How long should we wait for? Well, approximately a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. When we spend 2 minutes or even less, it's because it takes some time for the central nervous system to comprehend. I don't need to send signals of contraction to this muscle anymore. It achieved its dream. It's like it's been struggling and struggling, and finally it manifested what it's been trying to manifest.
Do we keep constant pressure for these 2 minutes?
Yes.
And is it the pressure that you said of the tension?
Yes, that matches the tension.
So it's quite a bit.
Yes. Correct. And mindfulness in this particular case is to apply not too much pressure, not too little. If you apply too much pressure, you will hurt yourself unnecessarily. If you apply too little pressure, it's not going to be effective. So we want to basically apply just the right amount of pressure. And of course, it's a matter of practice. I can talk about it till cows come home, but for you to actually develop the skill, you need to practice it. Once you hold it for a bit of time, maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes, if your central nervous system takes its sweet time to comprehend that it doesn't need to send so many signals of contraction to this muscle, eventually it will stop sending signals of contraction. And then the muscle will start relaxing. Once it starts relaxing, take about the same length of time to actually allow it to relax slowly and consistently. I'm still applying pressure, but because the tension is subsiding, obviously the level of pressure also needs to be less. You know, you're still matching the tension with pressure. If there is less tension, well, it needs less pressure. And you also change the direction of pressure. Instead of applying pressure towards the opposite end of the muscle, now you're actually facilitating the reversal of the process. The first process was the process of shortening or contracting the muscle. So the flow of contraction goes towards the opposite end. Now we're actually working on the reversal of this flow, the flow of relaxation, which lengthens the muscle. And we literally apply pressure towards the opposite, in the opposite direction, away from the other end of the muscle. It literally means that we're facilitating lengthening of the muscle without stretching. We don't want to stretch it. We want to just let it lengthen. And once it's lengthened, it will have much greater mobility. It will not have so much tension. It will want to move. It's almost like tension is frozen movement. For example, if you have frozen shoulder, frozen elbow, or any other joint, it's because of the tension around it. And once you defrost that movement, defrost that tension, the movement starts flowing again. Your arm will actually feel like it wants to move and it wants to dance in some strange way, in a sense. Yes, the same thing applies to your neck.
Yeah, what about my neck? Because I mean, I don't know again the exact anatomy, but isn't it like the muscles go all the way down or something? I mean, am I going to touch my spine? How does that work?
Yes, yes, you touch your spine, you touch the points of either origin or insertion of the muscle. In other words, you palpate the neck, and let's do something even simpler. Simply moving the head in the direction where you shorten the muscles that are tense. For example, if there is tension on the side of the neck, we don't want to stretch them. We don't want to go this way. This is what most people do. Well, if you want to get the same results everyone gets, do the same thing everyone does. We want to get better results. So we would do things differently. We actually shorten those muscles. If the muscles of the neck need attention, we shorten them. And again, we hold this position of the head with the hand kind of supporting the head and applying a slight pressure so that it would match the level of tension. Neck muscles usually don't require that much pressure. And again, we're waiting for the central nervous system to stop sending signals of contraction to those muscles. How do we know that central nervous system stops sending signals of contraction? Well, by and large, in most cases, the whole central nervous system becomes less agitated. And that means it stops sending signals of contraction to many other muscles throughout the body. Your whole body becomes more relaxed, including your breathing muscle, your diaphragm. When the diaphragm relaxes, it often elicits the sigh of relief, or you start yawning. Or you just notice how your breathing pattern becomes a lot deeper and smoother. And that's exactly the time when you realize, okay, I'm releasing it. I'm letting go of tension. Then you simply allow the head to go in the opposite direction, not forcing it, but simply going in the direction of lengthening of this muscle. And you can explore what it's like to move along the edge. It's just an introduction to this technique today. We will dive a lot deeper into it on many other occasions, but I'm just sharing with you the way to work with the body in a way that it actually engages central nervous system in comprehending that it doesn't need to be so busy sending signals of contraction. And when the central nervous system becomes less agitated, sends fewer signals of contraction, you become more relaxed. Marcia, you had a question?
Question. Quickly, for Spy's sake,
Yes.
it works when you get your fingers in the right place. Believe me, I had a shoulder so jammed up, I couldn't lift my elbow up as high as my chest. That was as far as it would move. And it had been that way for 2 years. And in 20 minutes with the Lama over a visual screen like this, he got it to let go. I was ready to have surgery. It's just a matter of getting your fingers in the right spot. And then when I was working on other places I couldn't reach, like your butt muscle, I can't reach and sit and pull, I got a roll of toilet paper because it was soft enough and I could kind of shape it and sit on it in exactly the right place. So it was shortening that muscle in, or a tennis ball against the wall. Like you can't reach across your back. There's ways to get that same pushing inward effect with tools. So you're not stretching the rest of your body out of place. Also, I wanted to say, I put the name of that author that Lama mentioned in the chat. I couldn't even say it if I wanted to, but I spelled it off the internet and typed it in for everybody because I think it's good to look at the literature he's referring to. And last but not least, Lama Lucinda had a question. She's been waiting a moment.
Yeah, Lucinda, you have a question?
Hi, Lama. Yes, I'm listening with great feeling to what you're saying about the nervous system, and I understand what you're saying about the muscles because I do a lot of that, and I have a lot of places which hurt. I just push my fingers in. That I do anyway, and I understand. I think what you've been saying about the pressure on the muscle, it makes absolute sense to me. Absolute sense. But the thing I would love to hear about, if you have time, is this question of the messages from the brain, the nervous system, into the neuralgia pain, which I have. If you've got time to say anything, just to give me a little clue, because I'm quite sure that it's possible to get the habit pattern that's formed to release.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. I actually am planning on doing this exploration in a further class down the road, but just to give you a little taste of it, basically what it needs to be done is not only working with muscle and the signals that the muscle sends to the central nervous system, we can also work with the threshold of pain. Neuralgia, by and large, means that the threshold is so low that the tiniest signal feels like pain.
Yeah.
Well, so what we do in this case is we actually recalibrate our threshold of pain so that it's not so low. And basically, as we raise the threshold, we do not get bothered by the signals that are not the cause of concern. Basically, it's totally understandable that sometimes our threshold gets so low that the tiniest discomfort, tiniest touch causes pain or some degree of grief. Well, if that's the case, it's not the call to action. It's simply an invitation to recalibrate the gauge. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
Excellent. Yeah, I will dedicate a separate session specifically to working with central nervous system and how to calibrate different sensory organs and perceptions.
Yeah.
But
And
the idea that the fact that you resonate with the idea of working with muscles and with the different parts of the body through touch is really important. We also looked at not only touch, but passive shortening. So with the neck, we didn't even touch the neck muscles. We just passively shortened that muscle that was holding tension. And by passively shortening, we achieve pretty much the same result, maybe not as effectively as through touch, but because there are many layers of musculature in the neck. In some areas of the neck, there are like 5 different layers, one on top of the other. And so it's not easy to always find just the right muscle. And if you don't know anatomy fully, it's going to be a daunting proposition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we just simply look at what is the function that this tense muscle is associated with. If it's associated with moving head this way, okay, well, for example, then let's move the head this way and do it passively. So literally doing that which that muscle is trying to do. Once again, that muscle will appreciate it and will communicate to central nervous system, hey, help has arrived, the cavalry arrived and helped me out. And then the central nervous system will actually stop sending so many signals of contraction to this muscle. And then it will be able to relax.
And why is it that, as an earlier question was talking about, why is it that it kicks in sleep? Because I wake up in the morning in pain.
Yeah, so again, imagine how would you do something to the neck, for example, so that it would hurt? Like, how would you position your neck in such an uncomfortable way that if you spend an extended amount of time, let's say a few hours in that position, it would actually lead to discomfort or pain?
Yeah.
Once you understand, like, you literally have to examine, what is it that I could possibly do to screw myself up? And then, okay, well, this is most likely what happens in my sleep. Because I see the connection, I connect it to dots, the cause and effect. If I see that this is the cause of this particular issue, well, let's actually explore if I can sleep differently. Maybe change the sleeping position, maybe get a different pillow, a different mattress, or just simply retrain your body to maybe sleep on your back instead of on the side. And never sleep on the stomach. That's number 1 cause of neck issues. If anyone sleeps on the stomach, please quit, because that's one of the reasons why like 90% of neck problems are a result of that. Yeah, Marcia, you have a question?
I wanted to say that you've got 3 people online with questions.
Fantastic.
Myra was next, and then Rod, and then back to Spy. And before we close out, I have one more kind of business keeping thing to toss in.
Excellent. All right, Myra, I see your hand has been up for a while. Please speak up.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I was working on my knee and the outside of my knee where the injury was. And I noticed when 2 things, when I was pressing the area, the bone, it was the bone that hurt, even though they said I did not have a broken bone. It was the bone that hurt. And the other thing that I noticed was that it felt very itchy. After I applied the pressure, I felt a real sense of itchiness, and I was using my fingernail, like to really sort of, I don't know if I should have been using my fingernail, but it did feel good.
If you use your fingernails, please be mindful not to scratch the skin because nobody
Yeah.
wants that. So you can actually move in the opposite direction. Like moving this way would scratch, but using the fingernails in the exact same position of the fingers, but going in the opposite direction will not cause a scratch. It will still feel good, but you actually kind of gliding the fingers without jamming them into the skin.
No, I just stayed in one particular area.
Uh-huh.
And so that was my question about the itchiness, and also, again, like another person that asked the question, I wasn't sure how far or where the muscle began or ended, or where exactly I should be pressing.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it actually bumps into the suggestion that you said it was not a muscle, it's a bone. Bones, by and large, don't have nerve endings to feel pain. Even when you break the bone, it's not the bone that hurts, it's the tissue around the bone that got injured or compromised by bone breaking that actually hurts. So in 99.9% chances, it's not your knee bone, it's the muscle around the knee. As you said, on the lateral side of the knee, well, there are quite a few muscles there, starting with the hamstring. Hamstring is the usual suspect. We're just talking about how most people, if they exercise, they don't really give enough attention to the hams. And so the hamstrings are underdeveloped or not very strong. If they're not strong, they are going to be prone to overwork or injury. Why? Because weak muscles get injured a lot easier than strong muscles. And so if there's the tension on the lateral side of the knee, let me turn my seat a little bit. So if, for example, I palpate my knee and it's right around here, well, that's a good news because this is the origin, it's the insertion of the hamstring. Okay, if I go up the lower leg, up the upper leg, I can check if there is undue tension on the hamstring. If it feels tender, if I palpate along the muscle and it feels like a rope, or this tendon is really tight, well, that's a pretty clear indication that's the ham. All right, so fine. I will actually palpate to find where is the end of the muscle. Like the muscle actually turns into tendon here, and then eventually connects to the bone. And I pinch it. It's not gonna feel great. It's gonna feel kind of painful or tender. So don't do it too harshly. Pinching it just to match the level of tension in the muscle. And then I'm gonna shorten it by bending the leg at the knee. And when I pinch, I apply a pressure towards the opposite end of the muscle, which is down, which is up the leg. So the hamstring connects the buttocks to the knee. And I apply pressure towards the opposite end of the muscle, so up the leg. And I'm gonna hold this tension, I'm gonna hold this pressure, matching the tension for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, if necessary, maybe longer, until I experience the release of tension, a sigh of release or sigh of relief. And when that happens, then I will start applying less and less pressure as I allow this muscle to lengthen and changing the direction of pressure. Instead of pressing towards the opposite end of the muscle, now I'm facilitating lengthening of this muscle, applying pressure down the leg towards the knee. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. That's actually very helpful. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Just yesterday, I was working with one of my apprentices from Hong Kong. And she's a relatively recent addition to my apprenticeship program. And so she was asking me this question, like, and she's a Qigong master or Qigong teacher in her own right. And she was asking me, so when a new student comes to study with me and they say that they want to learn Qigong, but they have some pain, what should I do? I said, please help them address that pain so that they're not struggling in your Qigong class.
Mhm.
If they are in pain, if they're tense, they're not going to be doing Qigong very well. In fact, if you tense, you cannot feel subtle energy currents. If you don't feel the energy flow, you cannot be in a flow.
Mhm.
It's going to be a deficient Qigong practice. It's going to basically default to just doing some forms and routines, and that's how most people do Qigong. And I think that that's norm. No, that's not the norm. It's a deficient way of doing it. So please help them first to release undue tensions. And then they will be able to actually experience Qigong much better because they start feeling, oh, the energy is flowing in my body. I'm no longer stuck. I'm no longer tense. The energy blockages are no more. Now I can actually work with energy flow. Makes sense, right?
Thank you. Yes,
welcome.
it does.
I think Rod is next, and we need to watch the time. Excuse me for being the taskmaster here.
Thank you, Lama, for your explanations so far. They've been very helpful. I can definitely feel what you're saying in terms of my neck really applies. I wanted to ask you, similar to Myra, actually, in relationship to my knee, I went to a physiotherapist and she said that I've got inflamed tendons in the knee. So it doesn't really feel like the muscle itself, it's more kind of like the tendon. So would your techniques that you're suggesting also apply to the tendon rather than the muscle?
You're on mute.
We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Lama. Lama, you're on mute.
How bizarre. I got muted somehow. Sorry. Yeah, so tendons is what connects the muscles to the bones. If the tendon is inflamed, most likely it's because there is undue tension in the muscle that's causing the aggravation and inflammation in the tendon. When we say, I have tendonitis, I need to do something about it. Maybe I need to take some steroids. Yeah, steroids is the way to tone down the inflammation, but I would never say, yes, steroids is the solution. Let's actually look at the root cause. Why is the tendon inflamed? And most likely it's because there is unnecessary or undue tension in the muscle connecting to the bone via that particular tendon. So if we understand the root causes, then we can work with the root cause. If the root cause of the inflammation in the tendon was actually chronic tension, that's what this class is about. We're learning how to undo the undue tension, so to speak. So understanding which muscle the tendon belongs to is number one step. If you need help with that, I'm available for private coaching and we'll be happy to work with you specifically to unravel this mystery. And then we actually need to address the root cause. Why is this tense? Is this muscle tense? What is causing this tension? Whether it's a particular holding pattern that you develop over time, or it's imbalance because the muscle antagonist is stronger. And so this muscle actually needs to get stronger. Or maybe you have an injury that had not been rehabilitated properly, and we actually need to get you rehabilitated. Just saying, oh, the tendon is inflamed, we just need to apply some steroids to tone down the inflammation, is again just trying to cover up the symptoms.
Thank you.
That's what physio was basically what all Western medicine does. 99% of what Western medicine does is basically dealing with symptoms, even though most doctors know this principle of dealing with root causes. But unfortunately, that's the standard operating procedure of Western medicine. That's why practitioners like me exist, to basically get deeper, dive deeper into what is really going on with our bodies, what is going on with our energy system, and how is our mentality or our consciousness affect our body, perhaps in such ways that are not most beneficial. If we have certain holding patterns, for example, most likely it's because we have certain stereotypical states of consciousness that we get so identified with that they become the norm. And this norm, this normalized state of consciousness manifests somatically in particular pattern of holding tension in the body. If it's not working for you, or you're sick and tired of this tension, well, we need to address the root cause, addressing the mental states and discovering how you can develop a new sense of identity that would integrate other states that would become a new normal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, you know, with my knee, I think I didn't do anything physically to it. So I think it's some sort of mental thing, emotional thing going on, which I haven't traced what that is. Yeah.
Well, I happen to be the founder or the pioneer of this whole profession of, or the whole modality of healing called pain body healing. If you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle and his writings, like Power of Now and so on.
Yeah.
Well, he mentioned pain body in his books.
Yeah.
But he never actually developed a method for healing pain body. He just talks about it and says it's kind of a nasty thing that happens to us all, and says you just need to be present. Well, if it was that easy, then we would just all stop being feeling pain or being in pain. Everybody who read his books would be like pain-free, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. Why? Because it needs a lot deeper understanding and application of certain principles and practices that I had to develop. Basically, I picked up right where he left off and developed the whole methodology of working with pain body and resolving the undue holding patterns.
Great. I'd love to work more with you on this.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to post in the chat a link. Feel free to click that link and
great, thank you. Brilliant.
Yeah, Spy, you have another question? Great. Or comment or feedback?
Yeah. I have a few things here. So you talked about calibrating the threshold, right?
Yes, I promised that we would be working on it in a separate session, but yeah, you're welcome to ask about it.
Okay, my only question is like when I have my period, my threshold for pain goes up quite a lot. So I don't think I could calibrate, like wouldn't be a natural to try to kind of mess up with that, because it's like a natural, like, you know, function of my body as a woman.
Yes, naturally, most women experience greater production of a particular hormone or a neurotransmitter. It's kind of funny, they refer to it as the substance P.
P?
It has nothing to do with piss. It has it doesn't have a better name for whatever reason. Fine. It does exist, and it does facilitate greater experience of pain, or lowers the threshold of pain. So you're absolutely right about it.
Yeah.
There are ways to actually modulate that. Now, there's going to be some degree of there's going to be some questions about, well, isn't it natural to experience more pain? Yes, it is natural to experience more pain on some occasions than others. So if that works for you, great. I'm not going to prevent you from experiencing all the pain you ready to experience, if you're ready
No,
to
I don't
experience
want
less.
that, but I'm just wondering if I'm messing up with my own clock, you know?
So we're not going to reduce the production of this hormone. We're going to work with a mental perception, the way that we perceive. It's like we all have filters of perception, and we filter through those all the signals that we receive from all the different organs of perception that we have.
Okay.
And what we do is we basically learn how to adjust. For example, if you go to a rock concert, it's loud, but you're not going to complain probably that, oh, it's so loud, I can't stand it. You're
Yeah.
enjoying it because you paid money to be at that concert. If the same level of loudness, like, 50 decibel or some, a significant noise is happening outside your window because somebody is running a circuit or a saw, you'll probably be like livid, like, oh, this is ridiculous. How come there's so much noise? I can't stand it. In other words, there are different mental states when we either anticipate something and we actually accept it as like, okay, this is happening. I paid money for it. I accepted that this is going to be what I want, as opposed to a reaction to something that we don't want and we are resisting. So there's a way to deal with that, absolutely. And we are going to apply these methods to all kinds of senses of perception, and even work on developing the sixth sense, which is a lot of fun.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that. Two more things really fast. One, you said you're going to upload some sort of a schematic for the muscles and stuff on Facebook or something like that. So we are aware on how to work on our own body, right?
I will look for it. The schematic that I would post probably is going to be for the whole body.
Okay.
More generic. But you would be more than welcome to look for any particular parts of the body. It's really easy just to look for anatomical structure of shoulder or elbow or knee or anything else, the neck,
Yeah.
whatever. There are millions of images online of all of these parts of the body. It's easy to come by. It's just a matter of doing a little Google search.
I don't know. I'm just not sure if I would know which muscle is specifically what I'm touching because I don't have a medical background.
That's
So-
exactly what we'll be exploring. We will learn how to become more fine-tuned about our own bodies so that we don't have to rely on some professional tell us what's right and what's wrong for us.
Okay, thank you so much. And the third one is, I noticed this is my first session. I missed the first one, but I watched half of it, and it was mainly introduction and stuff for the people. And I wanted to ask you, is it going to be like 45 minutes theory, like half an hour, like whatever the rest of the time is practice, or is it going to be in the future more kind of hands-on, like we did now as a group of people, because I think for me it's too much time for theory. Personally, it's a feedback. So I would like it to be more like 15 to 20 minutes maximum theory, and then the rest be practical, as we all have like so many things to learn.
I understand.
And the time is like, it's limited for you because so many things you can help us with. I feel like if it's not practical, like that, we're not gonna kind of learn how to do it.
I totally agree. And today I was introducing this rather sophisticated method or sophisticated way of looking at pain in general. So obviously required a little bit more theoretical explanation. Also, for a future reference, I would suggest to get acquainted with the anatomy of your own body, just starting with the muscles, because then it will take me much less time to talk about explaining the details.
Yeah, for sure. I will try, but as I said, I'm not sure if I know what corresponds, exactly.
Well, you're about to know. If you don't know something, instead of saying, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
The question is then, how do you get to know it? Well,
Yeah.
I already shared this.
Perform an autopsy on my own body. I don't know.
or actually just doing some search on Google and finding out what are the muscles corresponding to such and such part of the body that maybe hurts or maybe stiff or tense. You're always welcome to ask me for confirmation. I will be happy to help you.
Cool.
You are so welcome. All right. And the last, sorry, David, I made you wait for so long. I know that your hand has been up for a while. Please unmute yourself and speak up.
Thank you, Lama. Along with my Tai Chi and Qigong that I teach, I have also been studying Shiatsu for quite a few years.
Wonderful.
And your principles that you gave us this afternoon, the 2-minute pressure of extending into the muscle and then allowing it to relax to the opposite end.
Yeah.
That's new to me. And I'm definitely going to try and work with that. It sounds very interesting. And I thank you for passing that along. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Yes, this is not part of a standard shiatsu technique or methodology. So
Yeah.
Obviously you are going to expand your shiatsu skills beyond what has been taught by other teachers.
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
You are so welcome. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground today, and we have reached the point that I was hoping to reach today, the point of saturation with information, having some practice. So just to wrap up, let me suggest some homework. Doing simple scanning of your body to see where there are potentially some areas of deficiency, tension, weakness, or some other areas that may need attention. And then I encourage you to practice giving attention to those parts of the body through touch. Whether it's just a simple touch and just massaging it, it may be helpful in its own way. Or if you're familiar with shiatsu or other types of acupressure, great, then you can also apply those principles. And when we also learn more about how to bring the pressure to specific muscles and specific parts of the body so that they actually manifest their dreams, that I think is the most profound way of living our lives more with greater vitality and wellness. Because the more parts of your body you help manifest and live the dreams of health and happiness, the more parts of you will come together and help your entire being to experience greater health and happiness and live your dreams. Does it make sense? I want to thank you once again